Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. In this video, I want to go over item sets and potential builds to help maximize the capabilities of individual units. The units you choose to bring on a mission, of course, are the keys to victory, but they're really only half the battle. Equipment and the sets they belong to make as much of a difference as the units themselves do, but going over details and items can get complicated pretty quickly because there's a lot of RNG involved, so I'll try my best to keep things simple. To begin, let's go over set families to see which sets match with what units. I had a big monologue prepared about this, but I know that's not what you're here for, so I'll jump right into it. But before I do, just remember that again, RNG on stats plays a tremendous role in the potency of your sets. It's the eternal time and money sink for players, the unending quest to get that perfect item to complete that perfect set. I'll go down the list of item sets in order of the supply run locations they appear on. So with that said, let's get started. Military is a good set for any ranged unit. 30% chance to effectively do double damage is great and shouldn't be overlooked. This is a set that can pretty much go on any ranged unit, but is best used on slow shooting, close ranged units like Farmer and Lester. This is mostly because the proc doesn't require any kind of special condition. It's set at a chance proc rate. The best thing about military is its capacity to enhance burst damage potential, so it's best used on ranged units who excel at that. Farmer, Lester, and Willie are the best recipients for this set. Stats you want for military would be flat range damage, crit chance, and cost reduction. For Lester and Farmer, a prep time watch is also really good to have. Firefighter is a set that, as the name implies, is relegated to units that can inflict fire damage. You could equip it on any team that intends to spread fire damage through a red barrel or Molotov, but given how that can be a pretty iffy condition to fulfill, there are better alternatives. The good thing about this set is that it gives a reliable boost in damage for units like Lionheart and Flamethrower until later locations when you start encountering fire-immune zombies more frequently, at which point this set becomes pretty useless since its proc condition can't be met. So I'd say, story mission-wise, it outlives its purpose by the end of Location 6. However, for some missions in Location 8, 9, and on Metro, this is a good set if you don't want to rely on RNG proc factors and just want a reliable damage boost. Firefighter is not the most optimal set for anyone, so I'd say it's a tier 2 set at best. Potential recipients for this set are Flamethrower, Lionheart, Carlos, and SWAT. Scout is a set that saw a few changes last year. It started as a set that would give the user a 1 hit point shield for every killing blow they made that could stack. As paltry as that sounds, this set was actually a bit overpowered since the shield never expired unless through damage, and it would always soak at least 1 hit no matter how much damage was inflicted. That's because damage to shields will never dip into a unit's health pool, effectively making this a pretty strong set for units who are capable of killing at least 2 zombies to get 2 1 hit point shields out of them. This made it a significant upgrade over Lucky Guy for units like Rogue, so it got nerfed pretty hard, and then buffed later to where it is now, giving the user a shield worth 20% of that unit's health for 3 seconds before expiring. I found this to be a happy spot for it since the 3-second duration is long enough to get used in quite a few missions where longevity is wanted over damage output. The 20% health buff is decent since it can absorb a few light hits or 1 heavy hit, and like the old version, it can recharge again on the next killing blow. I honestly think this is an excellent tanking shield for units like Rogue and Damagers who are good at killing things but might need the health bump. Scout's replenishing ability makes it stand out from other tanking sets like Carbon and Lucky Guy, with the caveat being that it won't be activated unless that unit kills something. This set will want to have hit point boosts, both flat and percentage, as well as melee boosting modifiers along with crit and of course cost reduction. Gambling is a good choice for units that have special effects on their crits such as knockbacks or stuns. It's a viable alternative for Rogue, Guard, Rodriguez, Jailer, and Light Soldier. It's also decent on Juggernaut, but you need to wait for Juggernaut's shield to expire and its health to dip below 100% before this takes effect, which reduces its effectiveness, making it somewhat relative to Surgery in terms of how well it activates. I wouldn't consider it the most optimal set, but it does serve as a good alternative, especially if you get one with melee boosts, crit chance, crit damage, and cost reduction. This set is best used on units who have quick critical swings. Although you'll obviously want crit modifiers on this set, especially a crit chance book, you should also look for hit point boosts too, along with cost reduction and prep time reduction. Chef is a set that sees marginal use, mainly in support units where you want to further boost their support capabilities. It's an alternative set for Cap and Pepper mainly, but could also be used on Nancy and Medic. It should be noted that the 7% damage increase does not stack with more units using this set on the field. Since this is mostly going to go to a ranged unit, look for flat range damage stats as well as flat hit point boosts and cost reduction. Cost reduction goes in everything pretty much. Although Fitness is a legendary set, its bonus is mostly lackluster to the point that it doesn't see any use and therefore isn't worth getting into unless you happen across a piece that has ideal stats on its own. Boss is the best in slot item for cheap units that are able to be spammed out the door in large numbers. Redneck and Rodriguez are both prime examples of this and are best suited to the set for the majority of missions and events. This set you'll want to really prioritize cost reduction and prep time reduction first, followed by flat hit point and melee boosting properties. You really want to make sure you can send Rednecks out quickly. Rodriguez doesn't need as much of a prep time reduction as Redneck does, but will still want his reduced to around 3 seconds, give or take, if you can. Redneck probably anywhere between 0 to 3 seconds. This way you can theoretically keep the uptime on the buff at 100% if you have the courage for it. Tactical is the go-to set for doing skirmish on pretty much all your ranged units, so you'll want a lot of these. The only exception is Polina, who has built-in bullet pen as part of her final ability, to any ranged units who don't use bullets like Flamethrower and Dr. Norman. If you're curious, the effect from this does stack with Polina's final ability, allowing her to bypass 90% of her target's bullet resistance. I find this usually isn't needed, though, since you sacrifice a lot of damage for the extra penetration. My advice for a good skirmish Polina setup is to prioritize range over all else, but maybe I'll get into skirmish setups another time. Gentlemen. No, not you, the set. This is the set that you're going to by far want the most of. It is the best item set for a great deal of units, including some choice ranged units. This goes for any units who are able to hit rather quickly and don't have too slow of a crit swing. Although there are alternative sets for different purposes, this is the generic go-to set. For units, this includes, but is not limited to, Berserker, Saw, Glenn, Carol, Jailer, Rogue, Cashier, Mechanic, Lionheart, Builder, Light Soldier, Guard, Grenadier, Agents, Abbey, Flamethrower, Red Hood, and well, you get the point. The reason it's so prevalent is because it has an easy effect to proc, and the effect itself, 50% extra damage, is better than what you'll get on most other sets for DPS. However, when it comes to some units, notably ranged units, the 2-second window doesn't always equate to better damage as opposed to something that is not reliant on crit chance and speed like Military and Hunter. I honestly say, in my own experience, the outcome on which set to use for your ranged units will boil down to what stats you have on those items. Either way, you will be doing a lot of runs here solely for this set since you want to have a bunch for your characters. The ideal stats on this will vary depending on who you're looking to get this for. For example, Abbey and rage using units don't need cost reduction. Mechanic and Carol don't need crit chance. Rogue will need agility, especially for PvP, and so on. So when you're doing these runs, keep an eye out on who the item might potentially be good for. Patriot seems cool because unlike Chef, its damage boost does stack, allowing you to ramp up damage if you're able to keep that unit alive long enough. The problem is that the build-up is painfully slow and takes a long time to see results, even on a team like Rednecks. Therefore, you're simply better off having a set where you don't need to wait for things to stack up and can take advantage of far more impactful damage boosts sooner. It's also ultra frustrating if that unit dies before you can take advantage of any significant increases, which in later locations is going to happen a lot. If you have a set like this already with decent stats, then I'd recommend trying it out with a beefy ranged unit like Diaz or Willy on the Harvest Day event, along with a med pack, which is the only place I can see this set being viable since it's possible to have a unit alive for an extended duration. Upon inspection, Surgery probably looks like too much of a gamble to really capitalize on. Sure, it boosts the best damage boost of any set, but the price paid to activate its effect is too high for most units. Usually when a unit is below half health, they are already facing down numerous tough enemies and will die pretty soon anyways, thereby making this set below par since the duration of its proc will be minimal, if at all. However, if you have a unit who doesn't need to be close to enemies, you can self-sabotage that unit and enjoy some quad damage. This would require you dropping a barrel on that unit to reduce their health to be below 50%, so you'll need that on your roster for this to work. This works well for units in the rear like Polina, or units who only use heavy firepower temporarily like Abby. It's a gamble, but the payoff can be worth it, but the call is yours in this one. Icebreaker is really only good for one guy, Dr. Norman. The stun effect from units like Rogue, Jailer, and Willy is too short in duration for them to capitalize on its damage boost. Other than that, I wouldn't put much stock into this set. The damage boost you'd get isn't worth jumping through the hoops required to set up your roster for this. Builder is a set that appears on a couple of locations. It has some nice uses for units with large health pools like Chopper, since it will have a chance to proc more often. Even one proc from this item set means it just equated to what would have been a Lucky Guy item set. More than one proc means it surpasses Lucky Guy in Carbon. Again though, it's a gamble since it's only a 25% chance. The other thing that holds back this set is that it's limited to epic quality only, which is a huge downgrade compared to the quality of legendary items, so you'll want to make sure your fourth item is legendary quality and something good like a health percent book. I do keep a few builder sets for skirmishes to use in heavyweights, which is where I've gotten the best use out of it. The damage prevention can proc for all types of damage by the way, including lightning strikes and toxic gas damage. For this set, you'll really want health percent boosts and a prep watch. Some melee boosting stats is good too. Swiss Made is the most generic set out there and can be used on just about anyone. Its best use is for DPS units who swing too slowly to take advantage of the Gentleman set's proc. I should note that this is a best in slot item set for Firefighter and Turbo, both of whom are just that, slow swingers. It's an all-around good set and worth having a few to fall back on, and since it's found in the same run as Lucky Guy, you're going to come across a few anyways, so might as well pay attention to any drops with good stats on them. If you're new to the game or not sure where to go, this is always a safe bet to go with. Ideal stats will vary, but look out for the usual stuff like cost reduction and prep time watches. Lucky Guy is the de facto set to use in skirmish for a lot of your cheap melee characters. In my opinion, it ties as best in slot for Glenn along with Carbon since its bonus resets each time he resurrects. This is probably the only alternative set you can put on Sniper Polina or Charlotte if you find a lot of your skirmish matches are ending with a sniper versus sniper matchup, giving you an edge over the other. Basically, if you like skirmish, then you're going to want a lot of these with all stats, both ranged and melee, with a lot of cost reduction on both. Hitman to me is largely underpowered. I think it pretty much plays second fiddle to Gentleman in every instance, and I can't think of a situation where you'd want this over Gentleman for any unit, so I advise to largely ignore this set. Big Boy is best in slot for units with large health pools like Chopper. I personally use this on my soldier too to make up for his somewhat low damage, and I've always been very pleased with the results. The issue with sets like Big Boy and Builder is that you really need to get items to have health percent boosts in order to get the most out of them. Still, good to have a couple of good ones if you can, especially if you like using units with high health pools. Just remember, if you can't get that unit to at least 4,000 hit points, then you're better off with a Swiss-made set instead. Lone Wolf sounds cool, and I've tried hard to make it work, but it doesn't, by a significant margin. Even with its buff from last year, offering diminishing returns on equipped units where there's more than one in the field, it's fine that it just still isn't enough. It's a novelty set and doesn't see much use unless you're doing something you can solo anyways. I've used it on my rogue to solo location 3 supply runs, and that's about the extent of it. Hunter is the best in slot for units that can take advantage of its range requirement and hit from a longer distance, which just so happens to be a lot of ranged units. It's easily the best in slot for Polina and Charlotte unless you gamble with surgery. Though this set is in all likelihood better than military for most non-shotgunners, I think there are some instances where military is preferable, but again, it's very dependent on the stats of your own preferred style of play. I'll say that basically, outside of high rate of fire ranged units like Agents and close quarter ranged units like Farmer or Lester, this is probably the best set to have for all your ranged units unless you're up against bullet resistant enemies. The supply run, while not too bad, can be tricky since on wave 3, you will come across an egg. For that, I'd recommend using Abby in the Police Faction's 2-man bonus, which will either kill the egg or just bypass it and destroy the barricade anyways. Just be sure to put her out on that final wave and not beforehand. Hunter sets will want ranged boosts, ranged damage boosts, both flat and percentage, and of course cost reduction. Crit modifiers are a nice bonus too and shouldn't be overlooked on, well, any set really. Late 2024, we had the release of 2 new sets, Carbon and Piercing. Piercing is the set you obtain through weekly events like Walmart, Princess Rescue, and Harvest Day, and can be found in the shop from the event page. I've found Piercing to be very lacking, so it hasn't found a place with me yet, though to be fair, I haven't tested it out enough either. The only units who I feel can take advantage of this set are Willie and Austin. For Willie, it's a good set since the secondary target also gets stunned, allowing him to stun 2 enemies instead of 1. For Austin, it can make for some good coin farming and opens up new possibilities like Location 4, Mission 40 if you want an extra challenge. Other than those 2, I can't see this set being much use since it's situational, only being useful to combat large hordes of enemies. I also find the secondary shot's damage to be a bit too low, so for now, I'd say not to worry about it, but do keep a few legendary quality ones on standby in case this set gets buffed. Carbon, on the other hand, is an excellent set and in my opinion, the best tanking set for cannon fodder units. If you're having difficulty pushing forward, then substituting this set in place of Boss for Redneck and Rodriguez will have some great results as they will be able to tank hits like charged zombies much easier. Sometimes being able to take an extra hit or 2 on a bunch of small guys will make up for the DPS loss that Boss set offers. The effects from this set also procs in all damage types, including lightning strikes and paramedic zombie shocks. It's an ideal set to use in Welder for the Harvest Day event too. Be aware though, it also procs in Toxic Fog, which will quickly render this set useless on those missions unless it's on a poison immune unit. Either way, this set to me is the tanking equivalent of Gentleman, and you should look to have a few. I used one on my Rebecca for quite some time and I found it good there because she just lasts so much longer, so I get more value out of her that way. I should note, and I'm sure you've noticed, but when it comes to books, there is a large differential in stat distribution, depending on the stats. Not everything scales to the same level. In particular, books that boost crit chance, I find, are much more powerful than books that boost crit damage. It's possible to have a 57% crit damage boost as a secondary stat, but completely impossible to have a 31% crit chance as a secondary stat. The most you'll likely ever see is around 6%. Therefore, crit chance boosts on books are often the better choice unless you're equipping someone like Mechanic or Carol who have a 100% guaranteed crit, or someone who has a high base crit chance, at which point you will want crit damage and a lot of flat melee damage boosts. Cost reduction is huge, especially in PvP, but also very much in story missions. I'd say it's a necessary component on just about all of your gear. You will always get it to -2, and that's bearable except in some cases like Redneck and Rodriguez, where you'll need to have the maximum cost reduction possible, -8, to bring them down to a level that makes them competitive endgame. There will be times where you might want to look past cost reduction, provided you have amazing stats and everything else, but I find these cases to be rare, and you wouldn't want to repeat it too much on one character. A unit that costs 7, 12, or 17 is a huge difference from costing 15, 12, or 25 respectively. For a lot of my earlier plays when I was figuring these things out, I used to just automatically trash any item that didn't have this stat. I wanted it that badly. I think for a lot of people, it's easy to get stuck in a character and not want to make changes because you're very comfortable with that build or feel as though it's at its peak level and won't get any better. I currently feel that way about my Lester's build along with a few others, but with some characters, it's good to try out new things and experiment. It's how you come up with new combinations and find item pieces that you may have initially overlooked or didn't consider for a particular unit that you're outfitting. So my advice is to try not to get stuck with too many units using the same thing and to experiment more. You can always re-equip them again with the same pieces of gear later. That's about all I have for this video. As always, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next one.